Jason Gilbo, J Gilbo 11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J Clay, breaking down tonight's 11-game NBA slate. And if you're still playing NBA, maybe you've converted full-time into MLB or whatever it is. But if you're still playing, thanks for tuning in, I guess.
we appreciate you. We love you. We got our pens. I got some napkins. Maybe we'll write down some notes. Old school wise, write some stuff down. I don't know where I'm going with this, guys. Let's just get into the slate here so I can stop talking.
Looking at the Vegas totals, you can pretty much narrow down those West Coast games as being the high ones to target. Depending on some Clippers rest news, that's going to be a pretty likely blowout, and could be a pretty likely blowout either way, depending on what happens there. That's one to keep an eye on. The Minnesota game, there's a pretty decent-sized spread there against Golden State on the road. One that I still will be probably getting heavy exposure to.
It's sort of difficult to evaluate at this point because we're starting to see these huge blowouts and sort of players getting pulled and substitutions being off. And again, that's why if you have sort of a bankroll, it'd be smart to tone back a little bit if you're still playing NBA. But if you are continuing to sort of trudge into this journey, at this point, I trust Vegas, especially with these big spreads. Probably want to stay away from these games for the most part. There is some value opening up, and there are some tournament options in these games, but for cash, it's tough to trust these games,
Yeah, you got so much value opening up, and now you got 3 to 4 teams on a nightly basis. That's 1 through 5 at the position, pretty much value plays, and it's just sometimes in cash, it's banking on hitting on the right guys, and it's frustrating. But God bless you if you are continuing to play heavily into NBA. There are some other blowout concerns. Phoenix, Atlanta, 14-point spread there. OKC, Denver. I believe that one will stay close for the most part, but anytime OKC is playing a weaker opponent, they do tend to kind of run away with things towards the end.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it should be pretty close. Of course, bearing any crazy news.
Yeah, and OKC is one of those teams where they can end games quickly in the first half and get up 20 to 25 points. And Denver's pretty susceptible to that type of outcome at this point. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think there's a chance of that happening. So again, I think I would tone back my exposure to that game as well.
Yeah, obviously those totals, you always kind of know it's going to be heavily leaned on Westbrook and Durant, which is nice because it's not a guessing game with that team, but still, sitting over 10K, it's always like, maybe they do just go for 40, 45 that night and kind of let some other guys pick up the slack, and they definitely don't pay off their price tags with that going on.
Right.
So jumping into point guards, and speaking of Russell Westbrook, sitting at 10,600 on DK. The guy's a triple-double threat night in and night out, and even if he doesn't play 30 minutes, the guy can still put up 50-plus points, which is insane. And, of course, he's right there with Curry. I don't view them as much different tonight. I'm not leaning one way or the other.
Tournaments only for me, I think. I don't hate them, but I think in terms of what you're looking for from them, I think I'd rather just stick to tournaments with them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. I think they're just too pricey and in too big of spots where they could be in a bit of a blowout concern.
Right.
And as well as Chris Paul, you and I kind of differ on him a little bit tonight as far as where we stand on using him, and I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I guess, and it's between him and Damian Lillard. Obviously, they both have really good matchups. I just think Paul, in terms of range of outcomes, and I guess this averages out on DraftKings with his price, but I just see him as being a lot sort of safer. And I know Sacramento's a great matchup for Lillard, but even with price considered, I still think I give the slight edge to Paul here. Just everything considered.
Yeah, I mean it's so hard to knock a guy playing the Lakers defense, and this is all, of course, if Paul plays and is not rested, because Doc Rivers
Right,
said
right.
he could be resting some guys. But looking at price difference is not as big on DK, but looking at FanDuel, 9,700 and 8,000 for Lillard, that's a pretty significant difference.
That's a huge difference.
So I guess you're kind of looking a little more site dependent on where you stand with them, but I mean both in great spots. I know Lillard does have a little bit lower floor. Than Paul. But I just think, with games staying close, I think Lillard's kind of the guy I'm going to be leaning on tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Definitely.
but that Kemba Kyle Lowry matchup there is intriguing because they both sit a similar price tag. It's not an ideal matchup for both of them, but they're both so high usage. And if Nicholas Batum sits, as well as the other Charlotte injuries that could push some usage to him. And I mean, I don't usually like to target heavily against Lowry, but I wouldn't be afraid of tossing Kemba into a GPP.
Yeah, again, you mentioned they're both high usage players, so tournament only, but I think they're both worth at least looking at for tournaments.
Yeah. Kyrie Irving questionable for today's game, and he said out the last time you definitely see Kevin Love and LeBron pick up the slack, and they James' floor and ceiling just goes up a little bit there with Irving out, and Love has been playing better as well. If Irving comes back, I'm not really looking at him anyway. He kind of just makes LeBron an automatic play if he sits tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were looking over small forward, and his floor is just so high right now that all formats, he's just a great play. So yeah, but in terms of Irving, I mean, you kind of want him to sit at this point so you can have some solidified production in your lineup. But if he does play, I mean, that's just another thing you're gonna have to deal with.
Yeah. Looking at Ricky Rubio, whose price he's been playing well, but he's been kind of up and down of late, which has been the story with Rubio this season. But I mean, if you're kind of trying to hope this game stays close, Rubio, not a bad play, because Golden State's tempo and style of play, kind of helps out opposing teams, even though they are good, defensive efficiency wise. It kind of puts Rubio into play, especially with his upside as far as defensive stats and generating assists.
And again, much like everyone pretty much on this slate, tournaments.
Yeah,
fire him up, because I mean, he actually does have some legitimate tournament appeal, but again, it's so volatile, and that game itself, I mean, that's a big spread there. So tournaments, throw him in there, hope it stays close, but yeah, you're not trusting him in sort of a cash game lineup or anything.
Yeah, and I think I'll be more inclined to lean on Ish Smith there for a little bit cheaper in a matchup against New Orleans. Ish Smith kind of been, a little bit matchup dependent over his last 10 games, as you've seen. Struggled against some of the better defenses, but obviously a matchup against New Orleans is favorable for him. And at that price tag, it's kind of hard to get away from it in all formats. But I think he does carry a small risk to him, just because his floor is not usually in the range that we attack for cash games.
Right. In that range of player, I think he's got one of the better matchups and sort of one of the better situations in terms of sort of game flow and stuff. So I kind of like that matchup for him. And then you look at Jeff Teague. That's a really nice matchup, but how long can Phoenix stay in that game? That's another big question. Again, he's a tournament guy, but that could be a game that gets out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, that's another guy who's kind of site dependent for pricing. 6,900 on FanDuel, 61 on DK. It's so hard to play him in cash games, so I don't mind him on DK. I think FanDuel it's a little riskier, but at that price of 6,100, maybe he plays 25 minutes, but I can see him putting up a 6,100 worth of value.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I generally agree with you that it's a tournament only for me. Going cheaper, and if Chris Paul doesn't play, Russell Clarkson, they're not going to get the wrath of defense of Chris Paul, but I mean, intriguing tournament options, and we'll use that word again. Tournament options. I can't get behind a lot of these guys in cash.
Wait, let me write that down. All right. Tim Frazier, my boy, crushing it lately. He's at a decent price, and he's been doing pretty solid lately. Has a great matchup against Philly. I like him. I'm in.
Yeah, I can get behind that. And this is the all value game. This is the Super Bowl of value. New Orleans versus Philly, right here in April.
Yeah, it is wild.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on in that game that I think you can exploit as a DFS player.
Yeah. Looking at shooting guard and Jimmy Butler. I mean, the guy's been unreal of late. 80 DK points 2 games ago, 46 in the last game, and as the Bulls are trying to establish themselves in the playoffs, they're going to lean on Butler 38 minutes a game. And without Rose, I mean, he is that backcourt guy who just goes to town. And if Rose sits, he's an automatic plug and play. And here, let's use a word that we haven't used much. He's cash game worthy.
Yes. I mean, his price has dropped quite a bit from where he was mid-season, so the points he needs for his price at this point makes him very cash game applicable here. So yeah, definitely like him there on both sides.
Yep. Nicholas Batum questionable. He's a guy who's possibly going to miss and give some opportunities to other guys. Jeremy Lamb, Courtney Lee would see an increase in minutes and usage. I'm not really a fan of targeting that Toronto team. I just think I'd rather use Kemba, if anyone. I'm not going to be taking value away from that situation.
Right, I'm with you there. Yeah, just if Batum sits, maybe look at Kemba in tournaments, and move on from there.
Yeah, not a lot to like in that Charlotte situation. Dwayne Wade questionable. He's probably going to be questionable for about here on out. You've seen Gerald Green draw the starts. Josh Richardson has continued to come off the bench. Both in the situation have been very up and down. You saw Gerald Green post that pretty big game and then go for a dud the next night. Richardson's been a little bit safer, but either situation, it's kind of tough targeting against Detroit and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope there.
And so CJ McCollum, if you're playing cash games and you're playing Lillard, I think that's a nice way to like insulate some of the value in that game. Like if you really like Lillard, I think that's a nice way to sort of raise your floor a little bit. And even if Lillard doesn't necessarily have the best game, I think one of those two is going to have a really good game. So I kind of like that as an interesting idea for cash games.
Yeah, just because you look at this Portland total, but you look at that backcourt. I mean, how often do they not combine for less than 70 points? Usually,
Right.
it's hard not to see that happening in a matchup against Sacramento. And I think McCollum's definitely playable in all formats because we've been targeting shooting guards against the Kings for a long time now.
Definitely.
Chris Middleton, he's a guy who's questionable tonight. Didn't practice yesterday, and it's not the most favorable situation for him, but you saw Giannis take on just a monster, usage. He controlled that game, and it kind of shifts, value a little bit elsewhere. If he plays, he's not really on my radar anyway. I think I'd rather spin down to a guy like Andrew Wiggins.
Right, and that Wiggins versus Levine sort of combination right now, definitely going Wiggins. Levine's been a little inconsistent lately.
Yeah, Wiggins is playing well, and he's shooting the ball pretty well. And in a matchup against Golden State, I like him more so at the 3 than taking a 2 against the Warriors. But shooting guard's pretty ugly. I mean, you're getting into a situation, and now we get into an area of really 3 guys all from the same game: Jamal Crawford, JJ Redick, and Kobe Bryant. And the Kobe Bryant narrative is real tonight.
Yeah. I mean, he took what, 28 shots last game. I think that's going to continue to be the theme these last few games if he does play. So he was 11 to 28 last game, but he still managed 48 DraftKings points. So I think at 4,400, I mean, I won't say cash game, but like he's hinging on that if he does play, because he's going to get so many shots off.
Yeah, and you got to look at like the narrative of, okay, it's his last time against the Clippers. It's his last time against a rival, playing against Chris Paul if they're in. And you see him just jacking up 20-plus shots tonight, and just at 4,400, even if he hits 30-40% of them, he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as he doesn't go for like a Utah game, he's decent.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? 2016, here we are. Kobe Bryant's 4,400 on DK.
Hinging on cash.
It's odd. But to the opposing team there, Crawford and Redick, depending on, if guys sit, if you see Paul sit, if you see Redick sit, obviously Jamal Crawford would be the biggest beneficiary from that. And he would be a guy who's playable definitely in all formats.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving to a small forward, and it's pretty top heavy tonight. Although I think in the top options, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think we're going LeBron here. I mean, you could go. I think it'd honestly be a little contrarian to go Durant here. I think the chalk's going to be on LeBron, and rightfully so. I think that's the move at the top.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty close as far as production goes over the course of the season. Durant has had those stretches. LeBron's in one of those stretches now, so I'm just going to ride the streak here. Obviously, it's a great matchup for both of them, and I'll be just taking LeBron. I'll be taking him to the bank.
Yeah, and Giannis is an all right play, but I think once you start to look down, Kawhi's pretty intriguing. That game should stay close, so he should definitely hit value there, and he's a lot cheaper than the top three guys there.
Yeah, and although that game is the lowest scoring total of the night, I think Kawhi's my favorite play. It's going to be a closer game in comparison to some of the other games that you want to target as far as spreads go. And when Kawhi's in closer games, a matchup like Utah, it's not particularly scary for him just because he's gotten to that point where he's matchup proof, but he's not Vegas proof. We've seen that. So, and I'll play that card here tonight.
Absolutely. Rudy Gay, I can't do it. I mean, I know he's been trending decently the last two games, but we've just seen throughout the season, I mean, he can't put 3 games in a row together,
Yeah, he's hardly put 2.
So I think you can look at that box score and see he's put 2 good games together, but I mean, just know it's really volatile, and he could hit you with like literally a 12-point game at any point. So that's not a cash game play or anything safe that it looks like right now.
Yeah, definitely. There is a guy who's right around that price tag, and that's Robert Covington. I mean, since Okafor's been down, he's been pretty solid in the games that he hasn't been injured in. Coming off back-to-back tougher opponent games as far as matchups go. But like I said, I mean, this matchup as far as 2 of the worst defenses in the league, and you pretty much open up a ton of value. And Covington's really the most expensive guy to look at from this game, which is crazy.
It's so crazy. It's so gross. Oh, but yeah, no, I agree with your point. I mean, not a tough matchup, and with everything considered, 35 fantasy points. I could definitely see that being a realistic range of outcomes for him.
Yeah, definitely. And, he's not a tier 1 play, but he's not, you're not digging deep for prices there. Matt Barnes, 5,200 in playing GPPs just because he has a decent upside, and it's not a bad matchup, him playing small forward against Chicago, who have struggled against the 3 this season. And Barnes is a guy who, even if he's not scoring, he can produce other ways, which I like. And I think if he puts it all together, there's decent upside.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is it weird? I feel like the lower 4K range is actually stronger than the 5K range. Like, I guess that maybe is just a byproduct of late season, but it just seems like a lot of these lower range guys are actually stronger plays than sort of those 5K range guys.
Yeah. So let's dive into those 4K guys because really, I mean, you're looking at 3 viable options.
Yeah.
We'll start with the New Orleans guys, Jordan Hamilton, Luke Babbitt. Both obviously a great matchup against Philly, and I mean, they've been playing well, and they're going to get minutes just because of the injury situations.
And I think you have to keep them in mind for both cash and tournaments, just because the value versus their production of late is too good to ignore. and it doesn't seem like it's totally going away in terms of usage. So the matchup is good, and that's something definitely you want to take a closer look at.
Yeah. The other guy we're talking about is being below 4K or 5K is Maurice Harkless. Been playing well, averaging about 25 fantasy points over the last 6 games. Going to get a matchup against the Kings, who struggle against power forwards. I think he's been your more consistent option over the last maybe 2 weeks or so in comparison to just the last few games with New Orleans. But I'm just going to lump him in with Hamilton and Babbitt there.
Yeah, they're all kind of in the same tier for me, but I think they're all pretty solid value, and they're all cash game options for me, especially considering the price.
Yeah, especially because you'll be able to pair him up with a safer player.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to power forward, and you got DeMarcus Cousins, who's scheduled to play tonight, back at home against Portland, not suspended, no rest really considered. If something was to happen, obviously Costa Koufos, Willie Cauley-Stein would get big bumps. A little too expensive for me with kind of just the mince situation he's been in over the last few games, because he's, barely been over 30. He's been under, right around that 28 mark. I don't want to pay a guy who's 10K who's going to play 28, 29 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? So we'll see. We'll see how that one plays out.
I mean, obviously it's a great matchup either way because we've been targeting centers against. Don't rule them out for GPPs. You can never rule out Boogie, but I won't be spending my money there.
And I think you just look one notch below, and you look at what Draymond's been doing, and that's just more the safer direction with pretty much the same ceiling at this point. So that's kind of how I'm looking at that situation. There's nothing against Boogie, and hey, maybe if you want to play him together, that's all right as well. But I think if I'm looking to pay up at power forward, it's going to be Draymond.
Yeah, and speaking of what he's been doing lately, 16, 10, and 8 on average, 4.5 blocks plus steals per game in the last 6. And he's a guy who just he's just such a high, fantasy points per minute player. Never seems to play less than 30, 33 minutes, even in blowout games. So I'll just be targeting him against this Minnesota team who's, they create just plenty of fantasy points for opposing teams.
Right.
Skipping down a little bit, you got guys like Millsap, Aldridge, and that's scenario. I think Aldridge, it's not a bad spot for him just because the way he's been producing of late, and I don't hate the matchup, although people are usually scared away from the Jazz, but he's just been the guy lately. I mean, it's hard, but I mean, if I'm playing Kawhi, I can't see playing 2 Spurs. That's my concern, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you. And again, with that game itself, it's tough to get a lot of exposure to it. I think we're looking at Millsap here as sort of the cash game guy. I think he's a little safer option, but definitely an intriguing pivot point. I don't think Aldridge is going to be very high owned. Sort of in that 10 to 15% range. So, I mean, if he gets his normal 45 that he's been doing lately, that's a pretty decent option as well. But I think Millsap's a little safer here.
Yeah. And then you can jump down. You can take a look at Zach Randolph. Going to be going up against your Chicago front court that's been horrendous of late. Randolph healthy, playing well. Really look over the last 3 games there, 34, 26, and 37. 26 game came against Toronto, tougher matchup. He's come down in price just because he's been a little bit banged up of late and missed some games, but I think he's definitely playable in all formats.
Definitely.
Then you're looking at a lot of ugly matchups for a lot of guys. Favors, Fareed, Parker not in the best of spots. Randall's one that does catch my eye because the Clippers have been far worse against power forwards of late than they were earlier in the season. And Randall's a guy who's been playing well. And if you're banking on this game to stay close, Randall's probably going to be a part of it.
Right. And he's in a position to get a lot of rebounds and sort of get those post-ups and sort of 15-footers and stuff like that. So that's sort of his role solidified. So definitely intriguing there.
Yeah. LA ranks 29th in rebounding. Obviously, these are 2 of the worst rebounding teams in the league, but Randall's a pretty solid rebounder, and I'll kind of bank on him to get his 10 and and probably match with a double-double tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Going cheaper, you're looking at JaMychal Green, Carl Landry in that value Super Bowl, Ed Davis, all kind of lumped together as value plays there, and all in great spots. You're just not having it. You're like,
you know when you bite into the orange and you get some of the rind that you like didn't get off. Yeah.
that's
All right.
NBA right now.
Whatever. Yeah.
I think those three are the most viable options down low.
They are. They absolutely are. But I'm not happy about it.
Who is happy? You're never happy.
I'm happy when Andrew Nicholson plays.
That's true.
Well. That's when I get happy.
That's true. We'll go to center, and it's a pretty easy night to dissect center. Towns, great GPP play if you're banking on that one to stay close. But I think it's hard to get away from guys like Whiteside and Gasol, especially Gasol in cash games at that price below 8K on DK there.
Yeah, you have to love Gasol at that price. And I mean, you have to love both him and Butler. So I think those are interesting sort of game stack options there. And I mean, Whiteside, another pretty solid matchup. And I mean, he still comes off the bench. So it's not like he's going to be totally matched up against Drummond the whole time. And Drummond isn't even a perfect defender anyway. So yeah, definitely two guys to watch there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Whiteside, he's averaging 5 more points per game than his season average over the last 5. And, his blocks per game are just always tremendous. You always know you're going to get that 3 to 4 block per minimum. And I mean, it's so hard to get away from him in this matchup against, Detroit, who've efficiency-wise, they just ranked 28th in the league. So
yeah, it's like him and John Henson, man.
Oh, here we go with the Henson. You want to call me out on the Henson?
No. He
got his 3 blocks. He got
4 that night. So for those of you that watched the other day, I was wrong. Jason was correct. And I will bow. Show my respects. Anyhow, what do you think about this Atlanta-Phoenix matchup with Horford and Len? Like, do you think that's worth sort of digging into, or is that something to avoid?
I think Len's a pretty solid GPP upside, but there's also a ton of risk with him. Horford's the safer play, and I think at that price tag, 6,200, even a blowout, that's hard to get away from Horford.
Yeah, I do like Horford in that spot. But
Chandler, we can't forget about Chandler. He's been playing well, and he gets a matchup against Atlanta, who is still rebounding.
Yeah, Tyson Chandler's been killing it lately. Over 35 in each of the last 3 games in terms of fantasy points. So definitely not someone to ignore at only 4,600 on DraftKings.
Yeah, and I think people are going to be looking at Chandler, and that Atlanta Suns game went overtime last time. There was no Millsap in that game. But Chandler pulled in 27 boards. So.
I played that slate, and let me tell you, if you played that slate and didn't play Chandler, you did not do well in tournaments. So
you closed the tabs early.
Yeah, as they say, literally and figuratively.
But I think that game's a pretty solid play. I think you got 2 cash game worthy centers, and then Len, who's a pretty good GPP play, just because if he can get it going offensively, the boards and defensive sets should be able to put together enough of a high upside for him.
Right, and then again, another one of those guys in that New Orleans Philly game, Ajinka, only 3,900 on DraftKings, so still in that cheap range.
Yeah, and I think really those are the only guys I'm going to be targeting at center tonight.
Yeah,
Gasol and Whiteside just being linked heavy, and thankfully on DK I can play 2 of them because I feel much better against with center than I do any other position tonight, as far as rostering 2.
Definitely.
So, highest score for you?
You go first again. I've gotten like the first 4, so you get a few here. What are you going with?
I'm gonna go with Whiteside. I think we get a monster game from Whiteside tonight.
Okay.
I mean, like 60 burger.
Ooh,
yeah.
Woo!
Like pushing triple-double and blocks big.
Damn. All right. I like Jimmy Butler, so we're going to do that dance.
Yeah. All right. That's going to wrap things up here at the Mids to Win It. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.